Home Depot paint mixers of Reddit. What is the weirdest thing you've had to color match? It's a tie between the large jar of ghee, clarified butter, and someone's skin. I got both of those within a week of each other. The skin thing was because a woman came in looking for a paint color that would match her skin, so I thought, fuck it, let's match her arm and see what happens. She loved it so much she ordered it for her whole house. I named that color Susan's arm. Edit, I forgot a couple of other weird ones. Scotch masking tape blue. Was really happy with how that one turned out. Multiple ottomans, a reading chair, dog fur, an egg, a painter's shirt and a painter's jeans. Whenever people ask me this question, I'll respond with "let me tell you about the skinned woman," which is probably the worst out of context sentence you could hear out of a Home Depot employee. Don't work with paint at all, but one day I got home and parked next to me was a light green Thunderbird. I said to my wife at the time, that color looks like it came off an Avon bottle. Skin so soft to be specific. About a month later the car was back and I noticed a license plate on the front with the web address. So I looked up the site and emailed the owner. Turns out he was visiting the guy downstairs from me. They were in a band together. So I went down to talk to him. I asked him about the car and mentioned my comment to my wife and he laughed. Turns out the car was originally his mother's car. She had bought it brand new from the factory just to get that color. She had sent them a skin so soft bottle so they could make sure they got it right. I used to work at a Home Depot a few years ago. I mostly worked in the lumber department but worked in the paint department for my last month or so. Someone brought me a pair of shoes to color match, and they bought several gallons of the paint for a large room, so they must have really loved those shoes. If curious, it was just a regular pair of shoes. I'm not sure what the significance to them was as I didn't ask. We had a woman come in last summer wanting some deck stain color matched. I told her I needed a physical sample of the color on something to match it, and she explained that she didn't feel like going to her cart to grab the can. She then plopped her foot on the desk and asked me to color match a part of her foot that had gotten stain on it, and spent the solid 2 minutes trying to convince me to put her foot onto the color match machine, all while leaving her foot on the desk. In all honesty, I probably could have done it but decided I didn't get paid enough for that shit and refused until she left. Spent more than a decade working at a paint store, and by far the weirdest thing I had to match was the toe beans of the customer's cat. At first I just grabbed a fan book of colors and was showing her what was in the ballpark. At this point she was holding her cat, and it was content enough in its owner's arms. This customer wanted a precise match using the color spectrometer though, and handed the cat over to me. The feline was not happy. At the very least it wasn't trying to squirm out of my arms, but it was giving me quite a stink eye and was growling the whole time I was holding it up to the sensor. Doctor, I color matched a very unhappy cat's paw. It was an Ace Hardware, but I knew how to do paint mixing. A guy came in and wanted a color match. I walked him over to the mixing counter and he handed me a broken off piece of wood. One of the paint stirrers you get anywhere, with a splash around the broken edge just after the handle. Some purpley lavender color. I'm just on autopilot and ask, okay, this color? He stares for 2 full seconds, not at me, at the wood, and says yeah, in a heavy tone, like it was the color of his dead wife's eyes or something. We stood in silence as I did the scan, mixed the pigments, and watched the shaker machine. Worked at Menards for a bit in college. One day a lady came in asking to match the color of her bathtub. Like, she wanted to repaint her bathtub. Had to politely tell her that that's not how bathtubs work. There isn't a paint that we sold that would survive being fully submerged in hot water for large periods of time while someone lays on it. I still think about that sometimes when I'm in that store. About 10 years ago I was working at Walmart in high school. This lady once came in and said she has a color in mind but can't find anything similar, so she describes it and I guess how to make close to it. It comes out and she wants me to add a little more pink to it, so I do it and mix again. This went on for near an hour, but then I finally got it right. It was a great shift. I worked at a paint store for years and didn't get anything too weird to match. The only thing that stands out was this guy that would come in to match mini farm tractor collectible models. He wanted the paint to match exactly and it would take hours for him to decide on a color. This was a car paint store, so sometimes we'd have to help people find their paint codes. Some models have codes in the trunk underneath the spare tire cover. We'd go out to the car and the trunk would be absolutely full of junk. So you stand there while the customer begins to sweat as they try to push all of their embarrassing items out of the way, including dildos on at least one occasion. It wasn't a color match exactly, we just had to mix a very bright pink. It was afterward that the mom of this little girl pulled out a container of glitter and said, "Will this be able to be mixed in with it too?" So we ended up just kind of saying fuck it and mixing a big container of glitter into a gallon of paint. I'm not sure if it ever worked. Kind of doubt it did, but the little girl was super excited about her glitter paint. Tostitos spinach dip. It was odd enough and with a good reward that I haven't forgotten it. A long time ago I worked for one of Home Depot's competitors and someone came in to ask if I'd be able to match the spinach dip that Tostitos was about to roll out. He wanted undercooked, perfectly cooked, and overcooked matched so that they could paint the inside of jars to show the manufacturing teams what each looked like as it all was made. The guy showed me a jar of the dip and we talked about how he'd have to remove all the spinach and red stuff, bell peppers, tomatoes, chunks and have just the actual dip. He left but came in a few days later with just the dip smeared and dried on some little cards or something. Then I spent a couple of hours working with him to get the colors right. In the end he was happy. A day after that he came in just to bring me a couple of bags full of Lay's, Tostitos parent company, and Tostitos with multiple jars of dips, including the not yet released spinach dip. He told me to share it all, but I was in my mid-20s working full-time and trying to finish my second college run at the time, so that free food was a godsend. I put those bags in my car instead of the break room and took it all home. I worked at a store called Cloverdale Paint. I matched Sharpies, microscopic flecks of paint people scrapped off their walls, a woman's steel underwear, and more. Maybe the weirdest one was matching a guy's girlfriend's iris color. He wanted to paint something the color of her eyes, so he brought in a close-up photo of her. It was difficult because an iris isn't just one solid color, but it was fun and he left happy with this kind of smoky blue. Not Home Depot. A couple came in looking for a color to paint a trailer on their property. They brought in an old banana. Apparently the trailer was from an unwelcome transient who was littering on their property and trespassing. The cops didn't remove the trailer but sent the transients out of town on another charge. I used the spectrometer and got the brightest yellow from that banana I could get. Naturally I hear this story as I'm mixing and shaking the 3 gallons they wanted. I guess it worked since they said the trailer was gone when its hosts returned. Weirdest one for was a giant oak leaf. The color varied so much that I wasn't able to scan it and had to eye match it. After about 20 minutes of looking through every gold and brown we have with this customer, he informs me when he picked it up it was raining, so go run it under some water so we can get the true color he liked. Of course I obliged and another 15 minutes of searching and he was ecstatic with the color match. Worked in the paint department for several years at NHD. Weirdest couple items were Carhartt sweatshirt that a woman bought because her daughter wanted her room the same color. Later she said she was going to return it. Several people have brought in full pieces of furniture to color match, made it very difficult to hold the chair, tables to get the color matching machine steady. I landlords for a bit. When I bought a new unit I would totally redo walls, sand smooth, prime and paint, Somewhere along the way I figured out I could tint the primer and then get away with one coat of paint with really good coverage. Whenever I asked the paint mixer for this, they would look at me like I was a deviant contributing to the collapse of polite society. Not Home Depot, but I ran the paint department for an ace for a while. The guy I took over for was a goddamn magician when it came to color matching, to the point that he didn't even bother with any of the machines. He just eyeballed it and got a perfect result every time. So when the customers heard he was the one who trained me, they expected that I could do just as well as him. So one day, a few months after I take over, one of our biggest customers comes in to order 80 gallons of paint, and he asked me to match all of it to the color of his dog's eyes. I honestly thought he was fucking with me at first, before I realized that was dead seriously what he wanted, and I didn't even vaguely know where to start. I had to stall and run out behind the store to text my old boss, basically begging for help, because I knew I could basically kiss my job goodbye if I screwed it up, and he decided to go somewhere else. Thankfully, one of his little secrets that he never mentioned was that he had a book with formulas for all the matches important clients had asked for previously that he custom made, and the eyes formula was in it. After that, I just pretended to take notes on the computer while I looked at his dog for about 10 minutes and just started making the formula as soon as he left. I did paint mixing for over 10 years, not in America though. Had an awesome couple come who were semi-regulars. She was really careful about how she held the spit of fabric. Turns out it was a pair of her husband's underpants. After I found out, they assured me they were clean, and it became one of the best sales. We even nicknamed the color underpants blue. Another one, we were in the process of moving buildings, and one of the directors rang and said we needed some paint to tidy up the old building where they'd pulled down the old signage. Except the old color was done with paint and tints we no longer sold. But I'd been there forever, so I knew another brand had a formula. Got that, and we still had some stock on the shelf that hadn't been packed or moved. Only minor issue was the tint machine had just been put on the truck, so I had to go out, climb on the truck, tint the paint, then go back inside and mix it properly for the painters who were waiting on me. Text the director and he was happy, and you can still see the paint today because the old stuff had faded badly, but the building is due to be fully painted and renovated. Overheard while buying paint for my son's room. Lady in front was complaining BC the green she ended up with didn't have the speckles. She whips out a chameleon photo of, I presume, the same chameleon, and is trying to tell the young lady that the color they made for her was so flat. The young lady was so confused. Lady kept asking why the paint didn't have the speckle like the photo, and animal stood there patiently and watched the stuff dry and explain what dimensions are, how you can't match gradient, patterns etc. with one shade of paint. This is only relevant and hurriedly specific the help seems to be in this store. You can go in and ask for white paint, and they look at you like you're an alien for a few seconds and then point to a general direction, away from them, and say, I think most of the paint stuff is over there, but come in and ask for high temp RTV that cures flexible, and they're like all 17 midway through on the left below the anti-seize. Thanks. I was 20-something working at Home Depot in Phoenix like a decade and a half ago maybe, one of my favorite jobs ever. I used to use random paint to make fun painted scene on the lids of 5-gallon paint buckets. Then we'd hang them around the paint department. Fun. Such an easy job. There used to be a contractor that would come in with pieces of drywall, like he'd cut out a square big enough to use on the machine that treated the color. He was a pretty run-of-the-mill older, white dude, always very professional. Then one day he brings in a picture of a naked dude and discreetly asked me if I could mix a can of the dude's skin color. I helped him out, but I always wondered why he didn't just show me a piece of the picture or even a headshot or shirtless picture. Also, why the fuck did he need a can of it? I had to do it manually because the machine couldn't have read it off the picture. I did a pretty good job, I gotta say. Used to work at a paint store, not a Home Depot. It's been about 6 years. My weirdest color match ever was actually a wood stain match request. I had a customer come in looking at the wood stains. This was an older guy and he just looked genuinely confused. I start talking to him about his project and he explains it's something extremely normal. I think it was refinishing a table, and we start talking about stain matches because that is a thing we do and I used to be very good at. He didn't know that was an option and asked if he could bring me back something to match. I said sure, and he left to get this thing to match. He comes back about 30 or so minutes later with the shopping bag stuffed with a fabric of some kind, which was weird based on the convo, but people has asked for stains that matched goofier things. He pulls out the fabric and unfolds it all to reveal sheets, with a big brown spot in the middle. This guy shit the bed and wanted me to match the poop stain color he couldn't wash out with wood stain, so he didn't have to buy new sheets because these were super expensive. I explained there were like 20 different reasons why that was a bad idea. I think he has new sheets, but who knows for sure. Not Home Depot, but had someone bring a chocolate milkshake into our store wanting paint matched to it. My other favorite story is a couple who bought Ben Hogan's house in Westover Hills in Fort Worth. They brought in a sample of something that was oil-based paint and had nicotine stains. We tried to explain to them that it used to be white or off-white, but the yellowing of the paint and the nicotine had turned it to this snotty yellow color. They didn't care. They wanted the color Ben Hogan had been living with, just freshened up. I've been working at a local small paint store for about a year and a half, and when I started I didn't realize how busy I was going to be. When we color matching, we use a fancy device called a photospectrometer, which shoots light at it and reads the light bounced back into it. Then it gives us the formula so we can match the color into the product the customer wants. We mix the paint, then check it against the target material before revising if needed. The machine is so accurate we rarely need to revise or sending it out to the customer. In order for us to do this process, we need a flat, solid piece of material the size of a coin to put into our machine. The weirdest match I ever had was a cut of shag carpet with several different gray tones. We had this carpet-wielding Neanderthal walk in during a really busy week and say they needed 30 gallons matched that day. He was a typical hurry I'm busy kind of mouth-breathing, dip-chewing man-ape who smelled more like piss than he did cigarettes. He was doing the rec cafe area for some big office building and had to do the walls and exposed support beams. We told them we couldn't get it exact and they flipped out, saying that they needed it exact. No matter how many times we pointed out that there are different hues to the carpet, he kept saying just get the color. So my boss took over and made the most popular gray we sell into the most expensive paint he could, and we sent him on his way. Seen him come in a few more times after that, but now I assume his boss let him go because customers have made purchases under the same contractor's account that gray carpet man used that day, and I haven't seen gray carpet man in months. Well, I don't work at Home Depot, but I work at a automotive paint job. I had a black gentleman come in about 6 months ago. He's been a customer of mine for years. He informed me he needed me to match something in his car. This isn't uncommon. We go outside to scan, look at colors daily. When I get out there, he opens the back door and grabs a prosthetic leg. The problem is they sent it to him to wear, but it was for a white person. He said he couldn't be walking around in shorts with a white leg lol. So he hands me one of his older black legs and asks me to match it best I can. It didn't take long and he was happy with the color. I just picked a brown out of the book and tinted on it till it looked close enough to what he had before. Not Home Depot, but we had a customer come in with the statue of the baby Jesus from her church's nativity scene. The paint was chipped and she said the price to replace the statue was too high, so she asked us to see if we could match it. The woman working the paint desk with me said she'd give it a try. She succeeded. That's right, she color matched the baby Jesus. My wife worked at Lowe's and had a lady come in asking for the color of the sky. My wife told her to look at the samples and pick a color and she'd mix it up. The lady said, "No, I want the actual color of the sky," like she wanted her wall to look like the inside of a Vegas casino. My wife, seeing this lady is going to be a problem, asks her, "What time of day do you want? If it's nighttime, I've got black." Now the lady is getting upset that she can't just buy one can of paint to make her wall look exactly like the sky. My wife finished the conversation with, "Bring in a sample and I'll see what I can do." Lady then proceeded to ask for the manager.